Clean my glasses. Just cleared out in here too. We had 30 something students in tonight. So
wow.
Between the 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, and 8 o'clock classes.
Very cool.
30 something students in tonight. So
wow. There we go. All right. Hi, everyone. It's Rithkin from Ontier, and I'm doing the Murder of Duke series, and I have His Grace Lucan from the East on tonight. I'm excited to talk to Lucan. He was gracious enough to come out and teach in Ontier probably 10 years ago now.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. And he's sort of living the dream now. But anyway, we usually start these with your origin story. So if you can tell us, where, when, why you found the SCA, that would be great.
Sure. So the year is 1981. I'm 16 years old and an avid science fiction, fantasy, history nerd, playing D&D. And my mother notices that there are going to be live nights at a little Florentine fair held in Lincoln, Rhode Island. And I get taken to this thing and I meet this guy named Lord Ferrell von Halstern, before he becomes a master at arms. And I meet all these other cool folks and get involved in the SCA. Go to my first event like the next week, make some crappy armor, go to some fight practices, learn how to fight. But I got to finish high school and I kind of disappear for about 2 years. I come back late 83, and I haven't really looked back. Been doing this medieval stuff ever since. Spent a good few decades spending, 30, 40 weekends a year doing SCA events. Met my wife, Yana, 1986 at Ice Dragon, big tournament out in Buffalo that's still running. And I was squired. I ended up becoming squire to Master Ferrell. My first exposure to royalty is Duke Siegfried von Halstern. He's Ferrell's SCA brother. And so we're kind of royal householdish right at the beginning. So I kind of got a feel for all of that and kind of the movers and shakers in the East Kingdom. I kind of involved with one faction of them at the time. And I got pretty good at this pretty quickly because I devoted some time to it. I did a lot of Pell work, went to lots of events and really religious about going to practice. I also I was a competitive swimmer in high school. And so I had a kind of a disciplined athletic background. My family, all athletes, most of them all ball athletes. Pick a ball, they're all good at all of them. Me, I have bad eyes and I had asthma. And I really wasn't into the ball sports so much. I played football, of course, and I played some hockey, but baseball wasn't my thing, and I didn't really care for basketball. I was too rough. So I would just run people over as opposed to shooting a ball. So I didn't do that, but I did swim and I did gymnastics, and I loved both of those things. And this medieval fighting, I decided I was going to train it as if I was training to compete as a swimmer. And so I started trying to focus it as an athletic endeavor early on, which helped me to success within a couple of years. And there were always people faster than me, and there were always people with better vision than me and all of that. But I worked really hard, and I figured out footwork and I figured out timing and measure. And so I was pretty successful early on, and I had a 3+ decade run of, tournament winning. So it was pretty good.
In a nutshell. So I want to go back a little bit. I swam too, and it's one of the best ways to sort of discipline your time, I think, like being a swimmer.
Mm-hmm.
But let's talk about how you structured your training as a fighter based on your swimming, because I think back then that was probably unheard of, is to like treat it like an athletic pursuit, right?
Yeah, it was pretty much unheard of. Now, Farrell was fully supportive of it, and he thought it was fantastic because he treated it like a martial art. So, like, I was not treated differently by him at all. In fact, he embraced the way I was doing it. And I took from him a lot of great habits very early on, which was Pell work and really making sure that I figured out timing and figured out movement. Farrell was a smaller fighter, 5'6", 5'7". So if he didn't fight at range or try to control range, bigger fighters would, of course, dominate him. And so he fought more like a lightweight boxer, moving around quite a bit. And so to move like that even though I was at the time only about 170 pounds, to move like that, you need to be a little athletic. And so I tried to make sure that as I was doing this, I was treating it as if I was doing reps in the pool. So as a swimmer, you're going to do, 100 laps of a particular stroke. And sometimes you're going to do those laps, with paddles in your hands or with a kickboard or whatever. You're going to isolate yourself to work on whatever part of your stroke and or kick or whatever that you were trying to do, your flip turn. You would isolate each of those pieces. And that's what I would do with fighting is, okay, I'm working on my snapshot. At the time, there were no offsides when I first entered this. And so I was working on all the snap stuff and the Molinees and the wraps. I got to watch, at the time, Duke Morgan Sheridan was fighting with a 31 or 32 inch long sword. And he had a flick backhand, like an inverted Molinee. And I looked at that and went, why don't I take that same shot and do it with my 36? At the time, I used a 36-inch sword with a thrusting tip. And I'm like, why don't I use that technique that he's using and try to mix it in with the 1-2 combination, but drop the one and just use that cut. And so that started me throwing offside shots, which no one did on the East Coast. It just didn't exist. And so I started to really have a field day with this one new thing that I kind of came up with based off of watching someone do another thing, which was that Morgan flick backhand. He had a great large upper body and very, very fast hands. And so he would get in close on people and flick that offside into their face. I couldn't do that. I was 170 pounds and used a much longer sword and fought a different style. So that was completely alien to me to be able to do that. But to do a passing left-hand step and throw an inverted backhand became really easy for me. So I figured out how to get the timing on the movement on that. As people would directly come in, I would sidestep left and cut right. And they would just come into my space because I'd figure out the timing. And then that morphed into more and more convoluted versions of that same blow because I would work on each step. And that, like, one of the things I would do at fight practice is I would take things out of my repertoire that I was quite good at. I just throw them away. Like, this practice is offside cut, or this is the C cut to the leg, or this is an inverted C cut to the sword side leg, right? And so figuring out how to get those angles and to figure out how many different ways I could do that, and basically tie my hands behind my back on the number of blows in the repertoire and just work on each individual one. And that was all from the way I did swimming and the way I was taught to swim.
And were you doing that as an unbelt?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I started doing that kind of stuff as an unbelt. I won my first crown as an unbelt in 1988. I had to abdicate it because there were some membership screw ups, and that's a whole big story on its own. But I hadn't figured out the offside stuff yet. The offside stuff comes right around 1989, 1990, as I had moved from New England out to Central New York, and I was practicing out in Central New York against Morgan Sheridan, who at the time was the top fighter we had in the kingdom. So I was fighting at the same practice with him, and we were rivals going into that practice. So it was always hard fought at practice. It was almost sometimes like a tournament.
Okay. So in addition to doing like your creative Pell work and your isolation, what other things were you doing to train during that time period?
So I did an awful lot of fitnessy type stuff. So I had a circuit training program, jump rope. I would, at work, I had a cardboard box that I would throw down outside the shipping room loading docks. And I had my leather rope, and I would skip rope for the duration of my either my break or my lunch break. So sometimes 15 minutes, sometimes 30 minutes. You know, when you're 20, 21, 22 years old, you can do that forever. You know, 55-year-old me goes, what was I, crazy? But you can do that when you're younger.
Really good shape.
Yeah, and I was in good shape, and I followed. There's a Dr. Haas who, at the time in the '80s, did an eat to win diet.
I remember that.
Right, and so I followed that, and I was doing performance-y type stuff in the mid to late '80s, and it really, I think it paid off for me because I thought that there were much more talented fighters than I, but I kind of fought smarter, not harder. You know, even though I trained hard, but I tried to use every little edge that I could to gain time from people who'd been doing this for a decade or so. How do you catch up to people who have, you know, all those hours of reps in? And one of the ways to do that is, one, do as much work or work harder than them. And then it's find other ways to even the playing field. And those were ways that I tried to figure out to do.
I think that's a really cool insight, because I think a lot of people come in now and they're like, how am I ever going to compete against these guys that have been doing it, you know, like Sean and you, since they were teenagers, and, you know, now you're in your 40s, 50s. So it's been a long time. And so there are ways to do it. Yeah. So I think that's super cool. And that you were even doing it back then. Yeah,
so I kind of tried to take a scientific approach to it. And of course, you know, this is an evolution. You know, I look back now at what I did then, and I go, wow, you know, I was a beginner of this type of thing, right? You know, having decades now of experience, I get to go, oh, wow, you know, that was building blocks, but wow, I really didn't know what I was doing, right? But I was ahead of others. So as long as you're a page ahead, sometimes you're ahead.
And you're doing something, like, which is much more than what most people were doing, which was like a practice or two. And right.
Yeah, I took it more seriously, and it's honestly because of the environment I was in. You know, we had a New England at the time, and it still is very competitive for, you know, its sword fighting, right? Whatever way, you know, it was competitive, and we were expected to be competitive. And so that was in our culture, and I didn't think there was anything different. I thought everyone did these, you know, this competitive way of doing this. I had no idea that was a more or less unique view at the time. Who knew?
Did you have a training partner or like a squire brother or something that you?
I had several. Duke Randall was my squire brother. At the time he was Squire Randall, and then he was Master Randall, and then he was I won crown, or he won crown for Kenzik 16. He was king for Kenzik 16. And I was kind of like the head squire because he for their court. Kind of did a lot of the running around stuff. So I was around the royal entourage stuff again. But he moved to Vermont, or he was spending more time in Vermont and spending time as king. So I didn't get to train with him as much anymore. So I ended up training a lot with Earl Sebastian Nightwind back before he was knighted. And we would, I ran fight practices at Brown University, 1985, 1986, 1987. And it would start 7 and end at midnight. Around 10:30 or so, just about everyone would be done. And Sebastian and I would take the floor. And the two of us would just fight until I had to lock up at midnight. So we would get those reps in, and he becomes crown prince for Kenzik 15. So that was before Randy, and then Randy was directly after that. So they were my early sparring partners. And then Morgan Sheridan becomes my partner when I move out to Ethelmark. And then I moved back, and I've got a few fighters around who weren't quite up to that level. One becomes Master Pedrick. He's a squire at the time. One was my former squire, Duke Hans. Basically, I helped train him up so he could be my sparring partner. And then Duke Kenrick, of course. And he was my sparring partner. I used to spend a lot of time traveling with Duke Gregor because we were both on kind of the same event schedule. So we would, I would drive down to Jersey, stay at his house, we'd get in his car and go to an event in Atlantia or Southern Jersey. So we were less sparring partners and more partners in crime. We reigned together, several back-to-back reigns. We did spend a lot of time doing pickups with each other. And that's, I also got involved with fighting with, Brian Tarragon and Bedford and that whole crew, Anton and Kuhn and all of those guys. We all kind of gravitated together and spent a lot of time on the Kenzik fields together.
That's really cool. When you were offered admittance to the Order of the Chivalry, you took the title Master, right?
I did. I was a Master at Arms. I was the 4th Master at Arms or 5th Master at Arms in the East at the time.
Okay. And was that a personal belief issue, or was it sort of an homage to your master? Or
it was an homage to my master because Farrell was a Master at Arms and Randall was a Master at Arms and Tierlock was a Master at Arms. We were all in the same household, and I took it on the same way, but the kingdom was in a different space. There was a schism in the East at the time. The North, or New England, at the time, there wasn't really much of Canada. Just around Montreal had real activity, and a little bit in Halifax, but most of it was New England. And we were kind of like the redhead stepchildren of the kingdom. And so there was also some other issues that had happened with crown tournaments and all that. And so it kind of created a schism. And from that schism arose this whole Northern Master ideology, which was serve the people, not necessarily the people sitting in the throne. So serve your kingdom, not the throne, right? And you could serve the throne, you can swear if you want to, but your main job is to protect the people and to look out for the people. So that was our job. And that's what, ideologically, why I became a Master at Arms. Some years later, because there were changes in the kingdom, and because I'd been king 5 times at that point, I saw the world differently and decided that I was now at this point more fitting to be a knight than I was a master, because I was swearing fealty every reign.
So when you resigned being a master and became a knight, was it all sort of orchestrated together, or?
Yeah, it was all orchestrated together. So I had made the discussion with several peers around the known world, and then I sought counsel with Fast Eddie, who was an Easterner, and he was there for my mastery. He was there for the abdicated crown. He was there for a lot of things, and we didn't always see eye to eye, but we both loved our kingdom, and I told him what my thoughts were, and he said, well, this is how you do it. And so I followed the process. And Balfar was my squire brother, and he was king. And I go to Balfar and go, hey, Balfar, this is what I want to do. And he called me a bastard for leaving him a big pile of poop to deal with. But here we are, we're at Kenzik, and at like 3:00 in the afternoon, I take my self-addressed stamp envelope and walk it over to the mailbox with my letter of resignation in it. And Fast Eddie watches me put it in the mailbox. So I have now sent in my letter of resignation. They have a polling discussion at the chivalry meeting, and they decide that they're going to acknowledge me as a knight. And then later that night, I was knighted in court.
Cool.
And a bunch of kings from around the known world gave me their chains, and it was a really cool day and something I'll always remember.
That is really cool. So I like that, because your ideology didn't really change, right? I mean, you still believe in serving the people, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But I also felt that at that point that the crown needed my counsel and my experience. And by being in fealty to the crown was more or less obligated to listen to me at least. As a master at arms, he could not listen to me at all. But we're in fealty, we've got a contract, so we're going to have that discussion. Hey, I think you're taking us down into a pit of madness. Please don't do that. Comes better from the guy who's in fealty to you than the guy who you think might have stubbed his nose at you because he didn't like you.
Did your resigning as master sort of end the rift?
I think we had ended the rift between the series of reigns that had happened between 88 and 94, or really 2000 is when I traded in, right? But I served 12 years as a master at arms. And I figure my personal view of it is that rift had been welded closed with, a number of my reigns, Bjorn Carlson's reign, basically a bunch of reigns from the New England area, Randall's 3 reigns. So New England was no longer this outsider. It was the central part or a central part of the realm. So we changed the dynamic.
So New England is the northern part, like that's the.
Well, it was. Okay. Then it became the central because Canada grows, right? And so then it goes from there's a west which becomes Ethelmark, the south, which is the Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware section of it, and at the time had some Maryland, and we also had some Drachenwald at the time, all of Drachenwald, and then the central becomes some of upstate New York, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts. North is north of that.
Okay.
And then it changes again as the kingdom continues to grow and morph. Ethelmark splits off, Drachenwald splits off, not in that order, but.
Before we went live, you and I talked a little bit about the first reign that you had to abdicate and how it soured you a little bit.
Yeah.
How did you come back from that and become so involved in such a shaper of the East Kingdom?
So for one, I received an incredible amount of support. And just let me explain what occurred. So Yana and I get together. Yana decides, and I decide that we're going to become parents. And Catelyn is born in March, which is on our 3rd anniversary, the Ides of March. Yana is toxemic from the middle of January and has to be entered into the hospital. Our membership stuff comes in that window of time. Fill it out, think I mailed it, boom, right? I find out later that I didn't mail it. We thought we submitted our memberships. Didn't even occur to me that my membership was going to expire because we thought we sent it in. We were members through July. Our membership was going to expire in July. I win Crown in May. We have gone to Crown. I've won. The car is loaded up with all this kingdom stuff. Like, hey, you're prince now. Take all this shit with you. All right. And so you get your coronets and the extra set of coronets and these banners and whatever these cushions are for, and this bag of this and that. And so I get home, and now, of course, Catelyn's born. This has been several months later. It's May. I'm cleaning out the car, and there's an envelope. I pull the envelope out. And I go, oh, shit, this is our membership shit. That's the weekend of the event. I go, okay, what do I do now? So I call Milpitas at the time. Cliveden was in charge of things back then. And I go, hey, our membership is going to expire. I'm going to send you a FedEx with my membership in it. Figure done deal, no problem. I get a phone call from Hillary of Serendip, who is the Stewardess Society, and she says, you're going to have to step down. And I'm like, what? And she's like, you're going to have to step down. I'm like, it's May, and my membership expires in July. There's just like a bunch of time between this. Why do I have to step down? And she's like, well, you're just going to have to do that. I'm like, okay. And then our crown backed it, so I stepped down. And there was something with the law, the East Kingdom law said that your membership had to go for 2 months after the crown tournament, blah, blah, blah. There was some loophole thing. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'm stepping down. So I abdicated. I didn't make a big deal of it, but people did. And I didn't think it was fair because they wouldn't have known if I didn't turn myself in. If I didn't try to fix this, right? If I didn't do the honest thing, nothing would have happened. I could have done my reign. I could have mailed it in. No one would have processed it. It could have gone whatever. But that's not what I did. I followed the rules. I tried to live within the system, and I kind of felt like I got screwed. And I'm like, well, what is this thing that we're a part of that will do this to us for this? And that summer I received a lot of support. My squire brother Randall won his second in the refight of our crown tournament. He went and won. Right, so he went and won, so that made it less bitter for me. He asked me before, he goes, hey, I don't want to fight in this. This was yours. And I'm like, no, you go take this, go win this thing. Because there's all that other kingdom stuff going on too. So it was like, this is for the better of everybody. Just go do it. Later on that summer, at Kenzik, I get knighted, but I take the baldric. And I had a whole bunch of people from all over the world treat me really, really well that Kenzik. And it kind of brought me a little new life. However, it never ended a little bit of bitterness for Yana. So there was always a little touch of bitterness to this whole thing for many, many years after that. Now, of course, it all doesn't matter because none of this really matters, right. Other than the stories that we make for ourselves. But it did hurt at the time.
Well, what's disappointing about that and about other things that go that way is that we're supposed to be this society based on honor and you did the honorable thing, and you got.
That's what I felt I did.
Yeah, and
you know?
that's just I'm glad it's not that way anymore, but it doesn't feel right, you know.
Yeah, there were a number of things in the era. I don't know if you did an interview with Viscountess Gwendolyn.
We're going to
but
do
this
one.
is all.
Yeah.
Please do. She has an interesting story to tell about Drachenwald, and this is all tied together from that time period. So it all gets into one big lump.
Yeah, you were the king that helped make things right for her, right?
No, I don't think I did that. No.
Okay.
She was basically part of our household, though.
Oh, okay.
So no, she gets taken care of. It might be Ronald who fixed it for her.
Yeah, she told me her story a few months ago, and I had never heard it before. And I just looked at her because we were Zooming. And
Farrell was Earl Marshal when that was, and Farrell and I were roommates. So I heard all of it, and it was sordid.
Yeah, well, I'm just like you won Cornet twice, yeah. But anyway, you guys should watch that interview. It's later this month. I think we're interviewing her on the 18th. It's going to be really cool. She has a really cool story. She does.
And she's a really cool person.
Yeah. Anyway, so anyway, well, let's get back. Did you know, or what encouraged you besides the people sort of rallying with you to fight and crown again and to go for it again?
Farrell, of course, my household, and Yana. Yana has been nothing but supportive my entire life about all of this stuff. And honestly, she did this mostly for me. So it has been a nonstop bit of support for 30-something years.
I just have to say something. I've never met Yana, but you guys have such a strong relationship. It's very cool to look
Thank you.
At it from the outside. You're just so honest and obvious with your love for her that it's just really awesome.
Yeah, she's great. She really is great. And oh boy, did I take her on an adventure. So
still living it.
Oh my God, yeah, every day.
So talk to me about reigning in the East. You've reigned 8 times there. How did it change over time? Are there things that you did that are now traditions in the East?
I would like to think so. I don't kind of look at that so much. So it was very different in the beginning. We were big. We were very, very big at the time. My first reign, Ethelmark was still part of the East. The Drachenwald was still part of the East. We held the first crown tournament for Drachenwald during that reign. So I got to feel the expanse of the kingdom. I would go from an event in West Virginia to an event in Maine, to an event in upstate New York, to an event in Delaware, to an event in Nova Scotia, to an event in Netherlands, right? And that was one reign. And we did events of the 26 weekends we could do events. We did them 22 weekends in our first reign.
Wow.
So we did a lot of traveling. We wanted folks to see a different way. So we were very pomp and circumstance oriented. We did a Byzantine reign. I'd like to think that we're one of the first to do the 40-person court entourage montage thing, where you look like you fell out of a painting. And we did our first coronation at a deconsecrated church, and Morgan Duval, Countess Morgan, had set it all up as a theater stage, as a Byzantine courtroom, Byzantine palace, and we had the 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 Charlemagne style crowns made, and we were in the lorums and the whole Byzantine look, and all of our guards were all in the Phrygian caps,
Really
in
cool.
padded armor with spears and shields, and we had like 40 of them, and so it was pretty cool.
What a way to like set the ambiance and the tone.
Yeah, the one thing that I regret from it was I was supposed to swing from the balcony. I was supposed to swing across the entire room on a cord that was up on the rafters, and I was supposed to swing right to court. And just before the event, they said, "Nah, you can't do that." Like, oh shit, man! I practiced that.
How epic would that have been?
Oh, it would have been like Errol Flynn.
Right.
Yeah, it would have been very cool.
Very cool. So how did you stay creative over time in your reigns?
So Yana and I reigned twice as king and queen. And then Yana said, I'm not going to be your queen again until you put 3 of my ladies on the throne.
All right.
And so she basically, our local Baroness Elspeth, who was kind of my SCA mom, I said, okay, this is the quest. And so a year later, I put Elspeth on the throne. Then another year later, I put Countess Caitlin on the throne. And then Randall's first queen, Marika, who was still a countess, was the third. And in 99, I put her on the throne, and I got done with that. And we had great reigns with all of them. Every reign was different. It's not, it's not the king who reigns, it's the couple.
Right.
And everything is supposed to have a different flavor, and we tried to do that with each of those. And each of these ladies, super skilled, talented, and super energetic, and they kept everything lively and good. And I learned an awful lot from them. That being done, I said, hey, Yana, I just finished a quest. And she's like, yeah, about that. You did that a lot faster than I expected. But in 2001, put Yana back on the throne. And then we did another, I waited another 5 years and then tried it again and did it again. And then another 5 years, tried it again and did it again.
Very cool.
Altogether, we won 10 royal lists, and I got to fight in 18 finals of royal lists. So a lot of fun fights.
Do you have like a Tourney Day Ritual or something that puts you in the right mind frame for a tourney?
Yeah, I do. For one, I don't chit chat. I get there very early. I stretch alone. I usually have a blocker, one of my guys to keep people away from me, so I can do my thing. That was my early days, honestly. And then as I got confident towards this, there was less of that. Up until my last one, I went back to old ways, and I fought a very top-notch Gregor. We basically had not reigned together in a long time. We met in the finals again. I was lucky enough to beat him, and then he was my heir. So it was like, old times again, 20 years later. It was kind of cool.
That is kind of cool. So you're doing, well, actually, I want to ask you about your household first, because you went from being a von Holstern, right, to creating this big von.
Yeah, so I never was really a von Holstern,
okay.
No. So Farrell is Farrell von Holstern, but Farrell had started up House Silver Dragon.
Okay.
Alongside of von Holstern. So it was Siegfried's household was von Holstern, and Farrell's household was Silver Dragon. And they were brothers, and they were equals.
Okay.
right? And Siegfried was a duke and Farrell was a master, but they were equals. They were brothers. And Silver Dragon was our part of the house. I created a household in 1985 called Von Drachenklaue, which was my little piece of the house of Silver Dragon. So there's Silver Dragon, and I'm in fee to Silver Dragon. So my Von Drachenklaues are with me, and off we go. Well, I wanted to make sure that when I created my household, I didn't really want to have them break off of me. I wanted us to grow together. But I also wanted everyone to have their own autonomy. So I encouraged all of my squires to create households and to develop students, and that we would train them all together. And we would do this as a group. And everyone had their own rules as long as they followed the main household rules, the Von Drachenklaue rules. Farrell, seeing that, decided he was going to institute something similar after the fact, which was great, right? Because we learn from each other. But so I start building Drachenklaue, and it grows to 200 and something people. We have a bunch of knights, royal peers, laurels and pelicans, and everything that gets done in the SCA. Kingdom seneschals, we've had them. Kingdom heralds, we've had them. Earl marshals, we've had them. Service is part of what I wanted them to all understand, is that none of this gets done by itself, and it takes competent, passionate people to make this all work. And somebody has to do the work. And if no one's doing it, someone's going to step up and do it. And if you complain about a thing, you best do something to make that thing better. And so that's kind of what we try to do. Part of what the philosophy of the household is make it the best for the most, right? The most fun for the most people. And so 10 people might really enjoy this thing, but we're trying to make it so everyone else can enjoy it too. So let's try not to be elitist about this shit and try to make it so more people can do it. So that was kind of, I think, the secret to the success of that household and my household, which, I've abandoned for almost 9 years, while I was I'm off building a business and a different sport. But I'm very proud to say that the folks who stayed behind, Brennan and Keelan and Kelly and the whole group, honestly, Kenrick and Evelina, of course, the whole group of them worked and have worked on keeping that whole dream going. And it may not be exactly my vision, but I'm not there to do that. It's theirs now. It's their ball to dribble. And they're doing a great job of it. And I'm seeing people treated well and advancing and growing and serving. And that's great. So what greater legacy? And a lot of that's Yana, by the way. Yana, taught me those things.
It's just a really amazing network of people that help and support each other to succeed. You did an amazing job, you and Yana, establishing it and having it in a way that other people could run with it when you took a step back. It's pretty impressive.
I tried to. So I was already trying to work on succession planning, right? And so I became a project manager by trade. And so I viewed a lot of this stuff from a project standpoint and well, what happens if anything happens to me and, or Yana, what if we burn out? What if, we need to take a step back or get sick or whatever? How does this keep going? And so I worked out a few different alternative plans and ways, but really the thing was training people, letting people lead, right? And letting them do the jobs. And then coaching them when things went south, because we're all going to learn. But I think that having a coaching supportive environment was key and is key to its success and its continued growth.
When you were still really active in the SCA and you had a lot of squires, how did you train them the kind of the same way that you run your dojo now?
I tried this, so that's like the prototype, right? So, there was a lot of trial and error, but I was a early proponent of 10,000 hours to mastery. So I knew that I did my hour of Pell work, right, every day for several years, and that's what people should do. So that's what I taught my folks to do. And I held a fight practice for decades. I started, I was a night marshal, was my first SCA office in 1985, and I've been training fighters since then. I had done some seminars. I have done, more formal trainings as I started to have more and more people to train. So I had to kind of do it more school-like as opposed to the one-on-one or one in three people. I would, okay, so Brennan's bringing his guys, Cullen's bringing his guys, Wolf's bringing his guys. They're all going to be at this event, and I'm going to do some teaching there. I'm going to have to do this in kind of a seminar format or a classroom format. And so I started to do that about 30 years ago. And that continued on and on and on, and I got better and better at it. It was an evolution though. So, what I do today, is different than what I did 4 years ago. As we find more skills, as we find more gaps in training, as we find more techniques that we want to work on. And then I've got a range of skill sets here now. I've got fighters who have been now fighting 8 years in steel, training every week. And now I've got people who just started last week. So there's a huge range of courses that need to be taught here to get people to catch up to those who are most successful. And then those to get those who have just walked in the door to be able to walk around in armor.
So let's talk about your living the dream with your medieval dojo. Like seriously, I mean, living the dream. Like I think there's a ton of people who would love to do what you're doing, and I know it's like a huge risk for you to do that. And can you just sort of talk about like what your vision was and what gave you the courage to go for it?
It's kind of funny. So sometimes I'm a seat of your pants kind of guy. So I opened up the Knights Hall. I had a decent job. Yana had a decent job. We were comfortably into the six figures, living a pretty decent life, traveling, doing whatever, empty nesters, kids were out of the house, that kind of stuff. And I was bored after our last reign, and like I was at a point where I had reigned enough, been king at Kenzik enough, had won enough, had done enough things where I was now just doing the same things over and over again. And the magic was kind of going away. In fact, it was going away quick. And I said, what do I do now on Facebook? And this guy showed me a video of the Battle of the Nations and went, oh, where the hell's this been for, new challenges? Woo! Right. My OCD got me and, off to the races. Well, I watched the videos and I realized that most of the people doing this were in their mid-20s. And, I was at the time a 265-pound, 46-year-old fat guy, right? Who was still pretty good at the stick stuff. But what they were doing was a whole different thing. And so I knew that I was going to have to train, and I knew that I wasn't doing anything to lose, right? I don't go compete just to go lose. And so I was going to be successful at this. And to do that, I knew that I needed a place to train me. And I was living here in New Hampshire. We had just moved away from Rhode Island. I didn't have a yard. We were living in a condo. And I'm like, okay, I need a place to train. So we rented the first part of the Knights Hall. I and a local rattan fighter who swiftly stopped doing it, decided we were going to have an SCA and steel fighting practice place. It didn't even have a name. It was just a spot in the mill. Then about a week in, I'm like, you know what? This place needs a name. And the Knights Hall was what I came up with. And then I started to train myself the end of 2011 into 2012. We go to Battle of the Nations. I come back. I had done a couple of like practices here at the hall where I invited everyone, that could make it to come train. And we'd had a half dozen folks come train, and then 2 or 3 of us went off to Battle of the Nations and come back. I spend the next year kind of running SCA practices here and running steel practices here, very small steel practices, mostly just training me. And then later in that, or 2013, we go to France. I fight in France, come back. Cat, my son, makes Team USA to go fight in France. He comes back and he decides he's going to move to New Hampshire. And so he moves up here, and now I've got a person to fight regularly with. And so the 2 of us start fighting regular, and we get another guy comes in, and he comes and goes, and we fight with some of the local theatrical steel fighters who are not, ready for the level of violence that we are willing to put out. And so that doesn't really amount to much. And then we go fight in Spain for the IMCF championships. And I come back. I had been laid off from my corporate gig that winter. And I was looking for project management work. And I came back and I went, you know what? Why don't I try to make a real dojo of this? And I was still thinking that I was going to go pick up a job and run this dojo. I had no students, no paying students. So I hold an open house. Then I hold the open house, and then suddenly I have 4 students. Then I have 6 students. Then I have 8 students. Then it's 12. And then it's 16. And then it's back to 12. And then it's up to 20. And now we've got, close to 50 people training here regularly. For a little while, I had a HEMA school here and a lightsaber school here. But I don't have time for that stuff here. Honestly, we have 18 classes here that are structured classes, and that's not counting team practices that they can book time for, which we have a number of those that happen here as well. So this place is a full-time gig. We have daytime classes, 4 to 5 classes a day, most days of the week.
That's a lot of work.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I've got a lot of great instructors now too. I don't have to do all of it myself. And I've just started off an online course program.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
So somebody wanted to check that out. Where would they go look for it?
Knights Hall Online on Facebook.
Okay.
And if they're interested in that, and then I'm going to create a Knights Hall Online, website that's going to connect to the Knights Hall website. But right now I'm just kind of like in the baby stages of this and using Zoom. And so I'm teaching an arming sword course and a long sword course currently.
And are you still fighting?
I am. I'm still fighting competitively. I tend to fight more in the melee or Buhurt type fights. Just came back from Nationals in Reno, which I ran the event, and but I got to fight. Oh yeah, I had fun. That whole event is a whole thing in itself. We lost our event site as I was driving into Nevada.
Oh no.
We lost our permitting the next day. I had to get new insurance on a new location, new permits for the new location within 48 hours, and had it all done, and we had an event, and it went, and we got inspected in the middle of it with COVID inspections by the health inspectors and all that, and we made it right through. So
wow.
it was
an adrenaline rush there.
It was as stressful as holding an event can ever be.
Yeah.
It was something, but I did get to fight and come home with a silver medal, with my team. So
that's cool. So what is it about steel fighting that gets you excited?
It's a lot riskier. It is honestly a lot harder. It's a lot harder to be good at it. Some of the things that I worried about as an early fighter, that athleticism and that diligence and all that, if you don't have that, you don't succeed at it. Plain and simple. SCA, there are people who can win big tournaments without really doing much. They're skilled, and they've been skilled for a long time, and the game is weighted in certain ways that allow those of us who are good at that particular game to stay that way for a long time, because it doesn't require the level of physicality that this does. This changes every day, and the level of athleticism is going up and up and up. And as I'm aging, right, I am trying to keep up harder and harder and harder. There's going to be a point where I'm not able to. But hey, everyone has a good run, and I'm still managing to keep a pretty decent run.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we were talking a little bit before. I mean, you and Branos both are in, better shape than you were, back in the day.
I am in better shape as a 55-year-old man than I was as a 46-year-old man.
Yeah.
Now, my 48-year-old me was in much better shape than I am now. But I'm not 48 anymore. And honestly, I have a lot more administrative work that needs to be done. So I don't have as much me time. And honestly, at 55, I'm just I've got a longer recovery time. The difference between 48 and 55 is significant.
Yeah. So have we not covered anything that you wanted to cover?
I wanted to cover anything you wanted to cover.
Okay.
Right. Whatever questions people have, I'm willing to answer. So I'm kind of an open book.
Well, somebody wanted to know about the Northern Masters, but we talked about that. Yeah. All right. Do you have a rattan sword? Because we can just skip that part if you don't.
Oh yeah, I have a rattan sword.
Okay.
I still have one.
See what
it is not handy.
Okay.
It is in the hall on the 4th floor in a bin on the far right.
All right, forget it.
With my SCA armor.
Is there anything special you would do to your rattan swords that people that normally don't do that you would like to share?
I normally fight with a 38 to 39 inch sword with no thrusting tip. I like to shave the sides to 1.25 inches. Right up to the measurement, and then I will throw 1 layer of strapping tape on it and 1 layer of duct tape on it. I don't spend much time on a sword because I will pulp it in a day. And I've tried the treated swords. I've tried just about everything, and I cannot keep a sword really more than 1 practice or 1 event. Okay. I blow out all the tips. The last 6 to 8 inches of that sword is broomed no matter what I do.
Okay. Well, cool. All right. So I usually end these with like 10 questions that I sort of ask everyone.
Sure.
And I'll sort of tailor them to you. What is your favorite medieval-esque or period film?
There's so many good ones. I think the Lion in Winter is probably my favorite.
Very good one. If you could fight anyone in the world, who would it be?
I could fight anyone in the world, alive or dead.
Doesn't matter. You choose.
William Marshall.
William Marshall. Good answer. Good answer. What's your favorite Kenzik story?
Oh, good. And there's so many good ones. I don't know what one's my favorite. There are just too many of them.
Do you have a good one that you could off the hip share?
Let's see. You know what? I should have thought about this before.
That's all right. Don't worry about it. We can skip it.
We'll skip it.
All right. Who do you like to watch fight?
I like to watch Brownos fight. I love to watch Tradinus Vilcus was a knight from the East. He was the first really person to be competitive in full plate. And he made all his plate. He just looked beautiful fighting. So he was a good one to watch. I've always liked watching Tarragon, Brian. And I'm lucky enough to have gotten to fight him quite a bit. There are a lot of good fighters, and I respect so many of them and the way they fight. I love watching Uther fight. Right, I love watching him fight. Always have. And of course, Stefan von Dresden. Yeah. And Stefan is just an amazing fighter.
I love it when Uther goes to 11 or 12. It's always so fun to just watch him crank up.
Yeah, and he's already at 11 or 12.
Right.
Yeah, he's great. He's great.
Yeah. So do you have someone that you admire in the SCA, and if so, who is it?
There are so many people that I admire, but I'm going to have to say that Farrell was the guy who took a lost kid and aimed him in a direction. And so I owe him a lot.
Cool. What book should someone on the path to knighthood read?
So many. I'm sure everyone's talking about Arthur Conan Doyle, but I would say I'm going to go with a Farrell mainstay, and I'm going to go with Strategy by Liddell Hart.
Okay, I haven't heard that one yet. That's a good one.
It's a strategy and tactics book that is probably the main reason that the Germans did Blitzkrieg. Cool. So it is a very good strategy book for people to read.
And you said it was by Liddell Hart?
Yep, B.H. Liddell Hart.
All right, I'm going to look that one up. That's one that I hadn't heard of before. What do you think is the most important trait for a successful fighter?
Humility. You don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And until you understand that, you're not going to know much.
What would you suggest to somebody who's still fighting SCA that they could adopt from the way you train steel fighting?
I think that if you are still doing traditional SCA practices in full armor, I think you should probably start to do some soft kit and move over to doing some of the boffer stuff. For one, it's faster. It's faster, and the recovery time for new fighters is significantly less. They don't have to heal up that 14-inch purple bruise on their thigh that might have chased them away. If they're wearing some thigh armor and they're getting hit with a piece of foam, they're not going to notice that they've been hurt, and the rattan will hurt them. And so gradually move them up to the rattan, but start with foam for all the new fighters.
What other uses do you think there is for foam in training wise?
I think that, I use it in steel continually. I try to not have my fighters train in steel, but once or twice a month. Most of the time it's done in soft. And I would do the same if I were training SCA again on a regular basis. I would move most of my practices during the week to foam and then use rattan on the weekends at the events. And of course, do Pell work, of course, with the proper tools. But when you're training with each other, you don't need to.
I think that would be a really good development. I think it would keep people in more and we'd suffer less injuries.
Yeah, and SCA population is an aging population. And so, as I said, 55 recovery time's different than at 48. And if you've got an aging population and you're trying to keep them whole and hale and still advance in art, you probably need to come up with some techniques to prevent injuries.
Okay. Well, thank you, Your Grace, for talking to me. I really appreciate it. I've enjoyed our conversation.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks for having me. It really is an honor to be with everybody. And, I'm kind of off in my own little world over here. And I owe the SCA an amazing amount. It is why I do what I do today. It opened up many pathways to me in my life, my family. I met my wife here. Most of my friends are from here. And I don't know where I'd be without it. So thank you for giving me an opportunity to tell my story and maybe help somebody out.
Well, I really appreciate your time. The next Duke I'm talking to is Christopher of Houghton, and that's next Sunday,
cool.
The 15th. So that'll be cool too. And then Wednesday, my sister and I are interviewing Sir Optimus Audis from Ontier, who is a very cerebral, interesting fighter, and that should be super cool as well. So tune in. Thanks
Excellent.
again.
Thanks for having me.
Right. Bye-bye.